So, over the last 5 sessions, I have been talking about perception and the fact that perceptions are not intrinsically real because they are empty and they are fluid and they are simply reasonably real, allowing, each species to function and to survive. So, perceptions are species specific and get handed down from generation to generation as long as they support survival of that species. And, and as we all know, our own species is at a turning point in regards to what we perceive is happening here on this planet, and who we are and where we are. Because we start to notice, that the repercussions of the lifestyle of the global north on the biosphere is absolutely unsustainable and very unjust, also in relationship to the global south. So there's a lot of, reckoning happening right now. And the Pew Research Center says that 73% of Americans feel sad about what is happening on the earth, and 56% are anxious about the future and feel motivated to do something to address it. But then 80% feel frustrated because of the political disagreements on the issue and the inaction, which comes from this constant chewing over of endless disagreements, a lot of it simply being just, wrong information, which is intentionally implemented in order to confuse people and split people. So we are really in a very kind of a stall, it's progress or action is basically stalled because of that intentional disinformation or fake news, how it's called today. And it's simply, a lot is based on differing perceptions and on the, firing up these differences. And, as you all know, a few days ago, Alex Pretty, an ICU nurse in Minnesota, was killed, by ICE agents simply because, he had his cell phone out and made some pictures. And according to the ICE agent's perception, he was a domestic terrorist. And according to the perception of his co-workers and his friends, he was, as they say, nothing but kindness, compassion, and had a strong sense of civic duty to help his fellow citizens. So this is a very different perception, these two groups have. And, most likely this will be fired up even more, as the stress and the tensions increase on the threshold, from one cultural narrative to the next. There's always a lot of tension, a lot of build up before there is a shift. So these sessions here, these Wednesday sessions are all about finding a way to ground ourselves and make sense of that build-up of tension and of all of the repercussions that has. How can we use our practice, our Buddhist practice, to stay sane in the midst of the build-up and contribute something to it which brings ease, which brings sanity to the mix, rather than getting swept up and, going into polarization. And, last week I have been in a training with Pat McCabe, or Woman Stand Shining, a Diné ceremonial leader and international speaker. And some of you were with me. I think 4 of us were with me in that training. And it was called Radical Abundance and Fearless Generosity, as the way how the planet works. The planet works through radical abundance and fearless generosity. And then there is us, who are trained by our culture in perception of separation and scarcity. So, and during this training, I have been asking Pat McCabe for her PIT instructions on how to respectfully weave together the Buddhist teachings with indigenous wisdom. Because there's a lot of talking about appropriation, and I want to be sure, to be respectful, but at the same time we can't afford not to bring this teaching into Buddhism. It needs to come in. It needs to bring in that which has originally been cut away before Buddhism was, quote unquote, exported to the West. And and what she said to me, Pat, she said several points, and I want to mention them here. She said, love this earth with us, don't hold back. Just simply love this earth with us and recognize her as a teacher. And I think that's what we are trying to do here on this Wednesday sessions, to recognize the earth as a teacher. And then she said, the earth translates spirit into embodiment. So the earth, under the influence of what comes to the earth from the stars and from other planets and from space itself, the earth translates it through the help of the elements into embodiment, and we are an expression of that. And she also said, that trust wholesome desire, if that the urge to evolve, trust that. And translate it into devotion to earth, into reverence to earth, into earth as a teacher. And then she also said, women must move with the authority of the mother. As women are life givers on this planet, we have that direct connection to earth through the life giving, if we have children or not. So love this earth with us, recognize her as a teacher, devotion to earth, trust wholesome desire, and women must move with authority of the mother behind us. And she was also saying, we need to try to remember why we came here and how we can make our unique contribution for the integrity of the whole, and letting go of the old narrative of separation and scarcity, so that we can serve life for those who continue after us, those who are little children today and those who are not born yet. By refining perception. The refining perception so that we can hear life calling out to life inside of us, as us. Because our bodies are made from the same elements as the body of the planet. And we can learn, to attune to what is being said in a wordless way, on an energetic level. And for that, refinement of perception needs to take place. And for that, we have the Buddha's teaching. Buddha's teaching are all about, breaking free from distraction, breaking free from habitual patterns of thinking, and directing the mind towards awareness. And in that way, we are learning to transform the heart and the mind and become more able to open and be in attunement. And there were 3 questions which Pat McCabe gave us as a homework to reflect upon. And the first one was, we need to remember who we are, where we are, and how it is. To remember who we are, where we are, and how it is. And the how it is all about recognizing that our physical bodies and the body of the earth are of one process. This is how it really is. And whatever we do to the biosphere, we do to ourselves. And it took some centuries for that to really hit home, but now it has hit home for those who are willing to see. So, let's shift to a meditation where we can try to connect more fully with those 3 questions, remembering who we are, where we are, and how it is. To try to intentionally live outside of human supremacy or anthropocentrism. And that's it's a tall order, because we are deeply, deeply conditioned. But it always starts with recognizing how it is now, and then, doing a reality check, how it really is. And, in the Buddha's teaching on what's called the 4 Satipatthana, the 4 establishments of mindfulness, there is in particular one meditation, which is the meditation on the elements, the great elements, which shows us immediately, very, very clearly, that our bodies and the body of the earth are of one process. It's not complicated, but it needs to be reflected upon, again and again and again, like all other practices in the Buddha's dispensation. They are not like a one-off practice and then you got it. And that is when the Buddha was teaching, that's over 2,600 years ago, there were so much less people living here on this planet, and the stress levels, I think they were much less high. And the nervous systems were much less fried than what they are now. Because contemporary life is not nervous system friendly at all. Where like about 8% of the global population hold 50% of the earth wealth. And so many people are in constant worry about how to survive, how to pay the next bill, how to get the next food on the table, how to get to the next day. So that's, a situation which we are steeped inside of. And that's, where we need to begin to recognize that. That, paradigm of separation and scarcity has created scarcity for a lot of people. Even, the planet is generous and abundant and always has been. It's just that some people take so much more than their share on so many levels. And, and some of those guys are basically in leadership to serve the people in broad daylight. It's really crazy. And that's where we are. That's really important to take that in, but that's not all what's happening. So, allowing the body to just be what it is, and the confusion and the helplessness, but then at the same time also, the capacity to know, which is much bigger than all of this. That's how it needs to start, to just take it in. Just don't turn away from it. Even we don't necessarily know right now what to do about it. But one thing we can do, we can meet with like-minded friends and turn towards this with an intention of bringing healing, to ourselves and to the place we live, and in that way we contribute. We contribute to this paradigm shift, which is already underway. By opening ourselves to the inner turmoil, which is perceivable, as we are saying yes to it. Yes, this is what it is. When one paradigm gives way to another one, there's a lot of chaos. That's a creative chaos. And we can't, have a paradigm shift and have it all nicely boxed up with a little bow on top, and it's a process, it's a storm. Because the earth knows what to do, and we can align ourselves with her. By, training ourselves to viscerally experience ourselves again as part of a living, intelligent earth and serving her recalibration. Like, being part of the immune system. As a practice, as a way how we show up. And, opening ourselves to her instructions, which come to us via the antennas of our bodies. Seeing our bodies as organs of listening, which can receive instructions in a wordless way, by life speaking to life, earth element speaking to earth element, water element speaking to water element, metaphorically speaking. It's an energetic communication. And we need to learn to relax with what's happening and become available for that information to land in us. And then, observing how that then plays out in our lives in mysterious ways. It's patience, perseverance, just like any other practice. Patient perseverance is always a central capacity which is necessary. And that's why these gatherings, we call them earthworm practice, because the earthworm is the champion of patient perseverance. A keystone species, so humbly looking and so powerful the influence it has. And the willingness to dive really deeply into the not knowing how to do this. Not knowing with the intellect, but there's a different way of knowing. Knowing with the heart and knowing with the whole body, which works very different. But it's extremely intimate and opens up a space for something we don't know yet. We don't know what the new paradigm is going to be. If we would know it, it wouldn't be new. It's emergent. So, sensing into the body and sensing the vitality, the aliveness in the body, the energy body. And whenever the mind wants to grab on some way of thinking about it, just let that go and come back to connecting with that vitality, the vibrancy, the somatic experience of aliveness. And in that way, we are becoming rewired into a deeper consciousness of who we are, where we are, how it is. Breaking out of the paradigm of separation and scarcity into something we don't know yet. But it's definitely connected with the fact to appreciate the fact that all living things are of one process, and we can't separate ourselves from the water, from the soil, from the air, from the sun, from the warmth. That's what we are. That's how it is. But we have never been, making space for that perception, because it wasn't part of the download, in school, in the family. It's new. It's coming through now. It's new and ancient. It's something we just forgot for some time, because a few hundred years we were all barking up a certain tree, which is now coming down. with a crash. And that's how evolution works. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's impermanent like everything else. So, it's about learning to use the human experience, the human body as a receptor site for the earth updating herself right now, because of the way our species has gotten out of control in terms of technology and the using of technology. So there needs to be an adaptation. And we can navigate that by attuning to the aliveness, the vitality, the vibrancy. We can sense, which is the result of the coming together of the action of those elements. Earth element, water element, fire element, wind element, space element, the alchemy of that. And as that experiencing that, not with the intellect, but with the whole being, the chitta, how it's called in the Buddhist teaching. The heart mind, that which knows. Knows the intellect, knows the emotions, the feeling tones, and the sensations, and doesn't get lost in any of them. And that's what we call, refuge in Buddha, refuge in awareness. Being in connection with that aliveness before it expresses itself in diversity. Before it manifests into you and me and Donald Trump and whales and butterflies and trees. And to really honor that power by simply sensing into it. That's the way how we can honor it, by recognizing its presence in us, as us. Allowing ourselves to be changed from the ground up, so to say. And then, the thinking mind comes in with all kinds of anxious thoughts about the future. Yeah, of course, it's what it does. And the trauma, which is still locked in our bodies, and this is part of the work. we are pretty traumatized beings, living with this conditioning of scarcity and separation and domination and all the rest, living in a system which is not up to the job, because the planet works in radical abundance and generosity always. And this superimposed system of scarcity and separation is just like, it's not true. But it can create people who believe it's true and who see everything through those lenses, and then it seems to happen. And then everybody needs to fight about everything. So, residing in that liminal space of not knowing, where everything falls away and there is space for something new to become known, not with the intellect, but with the chitta, the heart mind. It's a different way of knowing. Approaching the mystery of all of this with humility and like a willingness to be changed and show up differently. And indigenous wisdom lineages have preserved that humility. That reverence of Earth as a teacher. And we have forgotten it, but we can remember it, and we need to remember it. And we are remembering it. So we can just take, some time now to really connect with that vibrancy, that aliveness, as a flow of information. As a data flow. And maybe noticing, that doing that together as a group, as a community, amplifies the experience. Whenever you notice, the mind wanders off into thinking about something, bring it back into the body and familiarizing the awareness, to reside as a full body awareness. I'm not going to worry about this and that. Just for this one sit. So, aligning ourselves with that data flow, but attuning and being changed by it. Being updated, as a human expression of the biosphere at this time, of great transformation. Which has happened many times before. And not taking ourselves so seriously. Remembering who we are, where we are, and how it is. How can we serve life, for those who continue after us at this transition time? These are the big questions which Beth McCabe, Woman Stand Shining, has given us who were on this training, as a homework. To come back to the big picture, who we are and where we are, and how it really is. And learning to tolerate the not knowing, which can feel like awkward, disorienting, ineffective and weird or whatever. That's the service, to be with that and make space for something we don't know yet, to make itself known in a different way than what we are used to. The intellect is a servant. The intellect is not in charge of this. It can't. It's too small. It's too linear. And it has an important function, but it's not in leadership here. We're not really taking good care of our bodies in terms of how we feed them, how we exercise them, resting, all of this, in the service of looking well after our bodies. They're instruments, very sophisticated, complex biocomputers, which have been developed over deep time by this planet. There are a certain expression like a flower, an animal, a mountain, a human body. They're all different expressions of that intelligence. We can't really grasp it. But we can, bring up a sense of reverence and awe by tuning into the mystery of all of this. And the love and the tenderness, which comes from allowing ourselves to intimately experience it. The effortlessness of that, flowing forth of gratitude, of all of the good emotions. They are like a natural result of being in touch with how it is. So in 1 or 2 minutes, I'm gonna ring the bell.